And hello to everyone. Welcome to the A to Z podcast. My name is Darsweil Rogers. A to Z Educational Consultants is a consulting firm that specializes in a holistic approach to primary and secondary education. And today we've got a panel that's going to talk a lot about a lot of the challenges that we are experiencing during this period of COVID and all the implications that COVID has in terms of education. I'd like to introduce our panel. I've got Mr. Jim Dilday. He's 39 years as a public school educator and currently interim assistant superintendent in a large California county school office. I've got Mr. Tom Anderson with 25 years in public education, with 20 of those operating and managing special education programs. And then finally, Dr. Carlian Dawson. She has 35 years in education from teacher to academia and is a master trainer of trainers for adverse childhood experiences, neurosequential model, and trauma. What I'd like to do to begin this conversation is to really, Jim and Tom, given the fact that you are both currently working in school systems at an administrative level, is for you to share with us what you're currently seeing. This is being broadcast in early September, and most school systems have made the basic decision whether or not they're coming back in a remote learning environment or whether or not they're coming back in school. And our focal point really is going to be on the remote or the distance learning issues. But Jim, starting with you, kind of give us a simple summary of how COVID has impacted the systems that you've seen, and then I'll ask Tom the same question.
Well, we really are in changing times, and everything has been impacted by the COVID pandemic, not just education, but especially education, but in all of our work environments. Recently, though, I'll share this, and it's really encouraging to me. I had an opportunity to hear from 32 school district superintendents, one after another, sharing what they are going to do about reopening schools. Every one of them, without exception, said, we're going to listen to our health experts in the county, and we're going to open when it's safe. We want to open, everyone wants to open, have students back at school, parents back at work, parents supporting the different councils that we have throughout the school districts. But it was so encouraging to me to hear superintendents without exception say, it's got to be in a safe environment. We're going to do it with smaller class sizes. We're going to do it in a variety of ways, but we're not doing it till it's safe.
So having said that, is everyone open and the students are in a distance learning environment, or have some not opened at all?
Well, there's quite a number of models, and everyone who is in the education arena has kicked around multiple ideas. For the most part, I believe we'll open with hybrid models where parents have a choice. Students could come to school with appropriate social distancing, with masks, and if they decide, or they could still have online instruction, or a combination of both. So it's wide open. There are many models that have been floating around, but it's truly a local decision driven by the community in which the school exists.
Very good. And Tom, same question. What's been the experience with COVID, and your what is the system that you're operating in? What's been taking place?
So I would echo what Jim said around the positivity or the hopefulness around reopening, but the understanding that we need to do it very strategically. And most districts are taking guidance from the state, whether that is our health agencies, the governor's office, legislation that's being passed, and trying to piece those things together so that they can be proactive and develop a plan for kids to start coming back to school. My lens is mostly right now special education. And so there are a number of students out there that distance learning has been maybe the worst experience educationally of their lives, simply because of their learning disabilities or other situations. And so in coming back to school, they're going to be a priority. And I think most school districts are going to set up a schedule with tiers or layers of students that come back. And our neediest students, our special populations, might have the first access to that. And I know in the district that I'm working with right now, it's a small semi-rural district, and I've worked in large urban districts, and it would be different. But in this small rural district, we've legitimately started with one student coming back, one special education student that really was not getting what he needed at home. And but we had a plan, not just for him, for any student coming back. But it is the goal of almost every educator I've talked to find a way to get back to whatever our new normal is going to be. And I also agree with Jim on, I see hybrid models being our first step back, where some students are here a couple days a week, some are still doing some remote learning, some are doing full-time remote learning still because that's what they've chosen as a family. So yeah, I think that it is really important to understand that most of our teachers and administrators are very dedicated individuals and want kids back on campus, but they want to do it safely. And they're using the guidance that's been given to them and the guidance of their own employees, their nurses and their mental health clinicians and all of the folks that we employ around those things.
And Tom, if you don't mind, I'd like to expand on that just a moment. It's not just students who are struggling during this time. The teachers are struggling to make sure, and dedicated and really honest individuals who serve students day in and day out for years are struggling because they want to make sure that the education they're providing is at a level that will help students just not maintain, but actually grow. And it's very tough because a lot of them are presenting remotely from a home environment. Some have elected to go back to their school site in their classroom, just one person in their classroom, so that the students get the feel of the classroom. But not everyone can do that, and it creates so much stress. So not just on students, but on teachers, parents as well. You know, just imagine things have changed for parents because, you know, face it, we're used to having our children go off to school, have a great day at school, hopefully a wonderful day, and then come home and share experiences while other things are being taken care of to support the family. So it's impacting everyone.
I think your point is well taken, and let me share a couple of observations here. I've had an opportunity to speak with a number of educators who have said to me they really wish that the systems that they're in would have brought the teachers back sooner and delayed the entry of the students to give the teachers a greater period of time to kind of get acclimated to this new reality. That's one thing I've heard. And then I've had conversations with parents, and as a matter of fact, one of my clients, I recommended that they ask their employees, how are they doing? Just ask the simple question. And parents have literally broken into tears around the stresses of having had the kids home, and now the kids have got to go to school, but the kids aren't really going to school. And so they're going to be, how do I bring them into the workplace? And how does all this fit together? And so with that kind of as a segue, Dr. Dawson, I want to ask about this question around trauma and education. I got to believe that, Jim and Tom are talking about these strategies at an administrative level, but we know that the human toll, children, parents, teachers, is real. And so how does that factor into the conversation?
You know, that's such a good question, Darsweil. And we know that this pandemic has brought people to their knees in terms of how to cope and handle what's going on. And we know that Black and brown people have had more issues and concerns about this trauma than anyone else. But at the same time, this trauma has caused even other people who are not Black and brown to see the real effects of what trauma actually does to individuals for the first time. For the first time this happened. So I have to say that whatever trauma was going on pre-pandemic has been compounded since the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So whatever they were feeling, whatever they're going through, the anxiety, it's just gotten worse. And it's during these times of uncertainty that children, not only do they rely on their families, but they also rely on their schools, their teachers, their peers. They look to them for safety and stability. And we know that on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety is primary. You've got to make sure people feel safe in order for them to move forward. And so even though, you know, we don't have all the answers about what's going on, but we know that children look to their teachers, teachers look to their principals, principals look to their superintendents, all of this for guidance and reassurance about that things are going to be okay. And right now, they're not getting that assurance. They're not, because everybody is afraid of somebody in the building or coming on campus. And because we can't guarantee that anyone's going to be safe the next day or not going to have an experience with COVID. So where schools used to be that safe place to help kids work through their trauma, now they're not. You know, teaching now is just taking on a whole new face. Social distancing versus physical distancing, all of these things are just has a whole new look. But you have to look and see what is trauma? What is it? You know.
Well, that's a great question. What is trauma?
And Dr. Bruce Perry, my mentor, talks about trauma. He says trauma is this. He says that is defined as a psychological, emotional response to an event or an experience that's deeply distressing or disturbing. Okay. I look at that and I say, trauma is soul wounding. It's a wound of the soul, because sometimes things get so deep and it's so bad that it just hurts you in your soul. And that's what this trauma does. And this trauma prevents children from thinking and being who they need to be. It changes everything about how they process information.
Well, let me ask this question, and Jim, I'll go to you first. Is the psychological strain of everyone in the system, obviously the goal of the system is to support the development of young people, to what extent have you seen conversations or advice being given around trauma, around this inevitable disruption? To what extent are you seeing that that's being factored into the way the schools are attempting to open back up?
Well, it's a fascinating question. I was thinking while Dr. Dawson was talking, you know, as Americans, we're pretty resilient and we expect things to be quickly resolved, whatever it might be, quickly resolved. And so I think back to early in March when the pandemic really hit hard and everybody was affected. You know, parents were home with their kids. Teachers were at that time attempting to maintain. They knew the students in their classroom already. They'd have them already for over 6 months, and so they were kind of maintaining the connection with students. And parents were kind of, you know, hopeful that in a couple weeks this will be over, and everyone thought we would be back to pretty much normal, not any real grave consequence. And then as it wore on, the trauma, which sometimes we don't even know what is triggering the trauma. We don't even know what we're experiencing, and the stress that comes with it, all of a sudden impacts us in many ways. And it was like, oh, well, I really was under stress, or I really am experiencing trauma, as opposed to when you know a traumatic experience happens and you respond. So in that time frame, and just the other day, we canceled events in March coming up. And I thought, my gosh, that's 1 year from when we started this thing. And, you know, of course, we're hopeful that we're going to be somewhat back to normal. We know that things are going to change almost forever as we, you know, learn to cope with this really serious matter. But in that time frame, I've seen progressively more concern and reaction and response to the trauma, to the stress, and kind of answering a call to help others get through this. And there are some who can more easily get through, and they step up and they really are working. I think Dr. Dawson is one example. She has her own issues within her family and life, and yet she's out there really kind of with open arms, lifting people up. And many educators do that. Many families are experiencing that. And, you know, certainly mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, grandparents are all rallying around each other. So this has kind of been awakening, so to speak.
So Tom Anderson, a similar question, as have you seen a lot of evidence of this kind of stress and trauma that we're talking about, and are you seeing any specific programs being put in place that might help students, parents, and teachers to address it?
So yeah, great question. And to add a little bit of value or context to the discussion, last night actually, I presented to a school board around the social emotional impact of the COVID crisis on students. And a lot of the data is clear about anxiety and depression and mental health issues being exacerbated by, you know, the pandemic. And the issues that are highlighted in many of those studies are things like social isolation, as Dr. Dawson said, access to mental health care. I mean, schools have become a primary provider of mental health services for school-aged kids, and we're not going to school. And so there's been a little bit of a decrease in the ability to easily access contextually related mental health services. Financial stability of a family is a stressor, not just for parents, but for kids. And then obviously, you know, there's bereavement issues and things like that that deeply impact our students and our staff and our families and our communities. So all of the data points to anxiety and depression and even suicide being on the rise. And the most tragic piece of the suicide numbers are that they're happening at a younger age.
Yeah.
So we really do need to ensure that we're reaching out now, but as we come back to school, we have a broad spectrum of programs to serve students and staff as needed. And early identification is going to be incredibly important, and a tiered system of how much support do they need. Do they just need to talk to somebody when they need to talk to somebody? Do they need to talk to somebody every day before they go to class? There's a set of tiers around how much support people need, and we're going to need to, even more than the tiered piece of that, we're going to need to be able to identify people's needs. Because
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to district control, but I'm really, I mean, this idea of waiting for them to come back to school. I mean, the crisis is now, isn't it? I mean, what we're confronting with what we're talking about is immediate. And I guess it was Jim who said, or one of you said about, you know, the nature of being Americans to shrug things off, and, you know, I would argue we probably think we're shrugging things off.
Exactly.
Go ahead. What are you going to say, Dr. Dawson?
Exactly. We think we're shrugging it off, but there's a book written by Dr. Bissell van der Kloot, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score. The Body Keeps the Score. And he talks about how, when trauma happens, it lands inside our body, and it lands in our weakest parts, and it stays there. And it manifests itself after a certain amount of time. It manifests itself. And so it shows us that the trauma that we're experiencing, it looks like, we can't just shake ourselves loose of this stuff. This stuff is ravaging us. It's engulfing us. And it's long lasting. It's going to be here, and it's going to impact us. And for some, it's going to shorten our lifespan. It's going to shorten our life because of what it's doing to us internally. And when we don't know when we don't know this, we feed into it. But when you do know it, there's hope. Then there's a way around it. You can help yourself when you know what's going on.
And let me say, I think I'm happy for you all to go ahead and jump in. I know I started like calling, but I think this is a significantly more interesting conversation if you all go ahead and, when you've got that next thought. I think Jim, both of you kind of say, yeah, I want to throw something in. Don't wait for me to call on you. If you've got a perspective about that, please share it.
Well, so much of what we said is focusing on access. With the schools closed down, the access for childcare is gone. The access for health services is gone for many families. That access to nutrition. And schools right now, although many are closed completely, are still providing in their way access to those critical needs that families have, and advertising and reaching out to families to let them know within their community that this is available right now, but it's not available in the way that historically it's been, and it's not available maybe at the depth exactly. And so everyone's learning now how to really respond to this and take advantage of the access that is available in the odd way that we're able to piece it together while this plane is flying.
And earlier I made a comment about whatever was going on before the pandemic has been compounded in Black and brown children's lives since the pandemic. And by that, when you think about that, when you look at the historical trauma, the historical racism that has impacted families for over 400 years now, all is a part of this current trauma. This current trauma is built on all of that stuff. So it's not just like we are looking at a plate that's equitable. We all got the pandemic. No, there is more like the plates were, there were still some barriers in prevention and not allowing people to have access to those things that Jim was saying. So now you got the historical trauma plus what's going on with this pandemic. And then you look at the bodies of individuals. That's why more Black and brown people die more than Caucasian people because of that. That lack of food access plays out in our bodies. That lack of access to medical plays out in our bodies. That lack of economic, having money plays out in our bodies. So all of that has a negative impact on all that we are. And so that gives us a deeper place, a deeper hole that we're in compared to everyone else.
I think.
Go ahead, Jim. I'm Tom. I'm sorry.
Real quickly, because that last couple of statements that you made were super important and evident in the research that I did recently for that presentation about students of color and families of color being more impacted around mental health services and access to social emotional and just health services in general. But when you talk about mental health services, a lot of students and families of color have a lower level of access, a lower level
Exactly.
it's more limited in terms of what they can access or what gets accepted. And there's definite hard evidence to prove that. And so it's important to recognize that and acknowledge that. And when you relate that to a school system that has over-disciplined students of color for years and years and years, a lot of mental health issues or things that are now recognized as mental health issues were disciplinary issues in the past. And so it's getting better slowly, but there's such a tie to the lack of access for just underrepresented populations. And there's so much evidence to support it that what you're saying is 100% true. And then the other piece that I want to just add is I didn't answer your question, Darsweil, about programs out there. And I don't want to list or name specific programs, but there's lots of programs out there in terms of social emotional learning in our schools and mental health support. And some have been employed in certain environments, certain schools, certain districts, certain communities for many years. Some have come on recently, but there's no limited amount of programs out there for us to access. It's about prioritizing those and making sure that we're doing that. There are schools that prioritize a social emotional curriculum or a social learning curriculum in every class every day. And there's schools that don't. And sometimes that's in response to a community demand, or maybe it's in response to the data that they've looked at or surveys they've done. And it might not always be the wrong decision, but there are certainly programs out there, and I could list 5 or 10 right now, but I don't want to give anybody an advantage, but they're definitely out there.
And I think really what you're saying, Tom, is there is no one organization, no one school district, no one school, no one program that has all the answers. It really takes—
Jim, that is so right. So right.
It really takes, I'm sorry, just finish your point, Jim. It really takes.
No, that's the point I'm making. It takes us all working together and taking advantage of those who can reach out and solve and help solve some real community problems.
So I'm feeling a lot of the stress in the community, and school systems are overwhelmed, teachers are overwhelmed, parents are overwhelmed. Is there, notwithstanding the fact, and when you, and particularly when Tom said he didn't want to list any, I was somewhat curious. I mean, I'm a parent and I'm feeling it. Do I literally go to the website and type in social emotional distress? Do I pick up the phone and call the principal of my child's school and say, look, let me tell you what I'm experiencing. How do we manage through this? I'm looking for something that is actionable by people who are feeling this level of distress. Any thoughts on that?
You know, all of the above. The signs of a healthy family and a healthy community is having a support system, is knowing where and who to reach out to. So yes, you do that. You reach out and talk, because when we don't, we take that stuff inwardly and then we, give it to our families. So that is just one way to handle that, is to talk about it.
In a prior podcast or interview with A to Z, I spoke with Dorothea Williams about social emotional support specifically, and what parents at home could do during remote learning to mirror or have some continuity between the behavior supports that students had at school and how to support positive academic behaviors at home. And my biggest point was, we have a ton of very educated, very experienced behavior specialists in our schools. They're called school psychologists, they're called mental health clinicians, they're called board certified behavior analysts. Sometimes they're called your teacher or principal because that's their background, but reaching out is the first thing that you should do unless you have a different route to go. And calling the principal is never wrong because they can tell you you should talk to the school psychologist or you should talk to Dr. Johnson, who works with our behaviorally challenged kids. So every educator in America is still working for the most part, and they're accessible. It might be by phone, or it might be through text or email, but they are still experts in their field, and they're still dedicated educators that want to support families, kids and families. So the question is, if I don't know who to call as a parent, if I don't know who to call, the never wrong answer is the school. And your administrator can help you navigate, but if you have a good relationship or experience with your case manager for special education or your school psychologist that has supported you on a student success team meeting, or something like that, those people, that's what they went to school for. That's what they've done for the last 10 years at your school. And their job is to support you. And if they can't, they're the ones that know people outside of school. And
Exactly.
so they can connect you.
And we all have to reach out to really make it clear that the schools are there and other social agencies are there for you. I'm thinking about something Dr. Dawson said earlier. For a huge population of our students, and not just our students, but their families, have either been held down or pushed back for such a critically long period of time that the trust of the system is gone. And we have to rebuild that. We have to be the ones to really hand that to them, let them know that, no, this is a trusting institution that you really could rely on. But it's hard when you've been in that position.
That's right, because this trauma is impacting, all of this lack is impacting our children cognitively. It's impacting our children physically. It's impacting them emotionally. It's impacting them relationally. You know, they can't have these relationships with their friends. It's impacting them. Someone said, I think it was Tom or Jim said, mentally, the mental health. It's impacting them behaviorally, and it's also impacting how their brains are developing heretofore. So this trauma is impacting us in so many ways negatively, that if we don't understand that we need to speak up and speak out to get the help we need, that's gonna reduce our ability to recover. So we've got to make sure that we are helping our families, our children, our teachers understand this, because all that stuff, it can't stay in your body the same way it came in. It's gonna come out differently. It comes in, you know, as stress, but it goes out as diabetes, high blood pressure, you know, you name it. All of these different ailments, that's how it comes out. And if you look at the research, and you look at the research, getting diabetes, that age is getting lower and lower. Yeah. So type 2 diabetes.
So the thing I'm hearing fundamentally more than anything else is this clear call to action, that if you are, you know, we're all struggling at some level with COVID. I don't care where you fall in the socioeconomic strata, the world is different. But for those who don't have clear outlets, there's a call to action to leverage the resources inside the school system. If they aren't literally within the school, there should be someone there that can help you to identify the proper or the logical place that you can get this relief. And I'm wondering whether or not parents truly know. Do you believe that most parents understand that they can go to the schools for this sort of support?
Well, first, I'd like to say amen to that. If we don't do it, If we don't have the outreach, who is going to do it? And so many parents don't have that understanding that they can reach out. They maybe heard it. They maybe saw friends of theirs do that or others, but some of them just don't have that belief yet. And it's really incumbent upon us to help them see that.
Yeah.
And you said something very important, Jim. They don't have the belief yet, because most of them believe, especially the Black and brown families, they believe that if school was bad for them, it's got to be bad for their children. So it can't be a safe place to go to get to outreach for help.
Yeah. I think
that's got to change.
I think this is this period in time is a tremendous opportunity. And if any of you ever meet people that I've worked with over the last 20 years, they'll laugh and say, "Oh, he says that about everything." But I think the spin is that we have an opportunity around mental health, trauma, social emotional support to remove some stigma.
Yes.
And there has been stigma to mental health issues forever. And you guys can probably each name an athlete or an actress or somebody who's come out in the last 5 years and said, I really was suffering from depression or anxiety or a mental health related issue. And they've been praised for ignoring the stigma and speaking the truth. And it is the same in our schools. Our kids that are in those programs where they need tons of behavioral support are stigmatized. And our kids that go to see the school psychologist, people know, and especially in junior high and high school, they talk about it.
I know.
It is an opportunity as we come back because everyone has experienced this trauma. At one point, I was going to jump in and ask Darsweil, Jim, Dr. Dawson, have you guys experienced trauma in the last 8 months?
Oh,
I know I have.
Yes. Oh,
So
yes.
no one's from this. So I think it gives us an excellent opportunity. And I think only by planning and working with the staff that has expertise in this area and the staff that has expertise in how we do academics and things like that, I think when we can coalesce those groups and we can, that's why I talk about coming back, because right now it's really hard to put those things together. But I think in coming back, we have that opportunity to reduce the stigma, to make it okay to need some help, and to really target those kids that need little help or a lot of help or a whole lot of help. And
you know, Tom, I'm sorry, Tom, finish your statement.
That was it. Thank you.
Okay. And that, you know, what you're saying is so real and so true. That's why there is a comeback, and resilience is the key. That's what we have to teach. Resilience is the key. We can come through this, but we got to understand what resilience is and what it does for us. It only makes us stronger. And so we've got to make sure that we let people understand that this is not all doom and gloom.
Right.
They can see this is what's happening, but resilience is the key. And if we know what that resilience and how to get there, that's going to be our success.
And so as we begin to wind this down, the thing that strikes me in terms of getting parents and others to open up is to be vulnerable ourselves. I think the question that you asked, who's feeling the stress, to put our hands up and say, let me tell you, I've been stressed out by this, and it's okay, and let's have a conversation about this stress. It goes a little bit back to my client who I advised them to talk. Simply ask the question of their employees, how are you guys doing? And they they literally said, thank you for asking. And the outpouring of emotion and concern. And if administrators would lead in saying, let me tell you, this has been a stressful time. Let me tell you where it's been. We've got to show vulnerability. We've got to show humility. We've got to be open. It seems to me that my summarization of the message that I've gotten from all of you all really begins with leadership in leadership in a different way. Leadership with humility, leadership with vulnerability, because you are by showing your vulnerability, you give other people to talk about the struggles and the stresses that they have.
And that is so important.
Exactly, exactly.
We all have a story. We all need to share our story and listen to the story of others, because sometimes we're so busy talking, we just are waiting for the next things to say, and we're not actually listening to people.
Right.
I want to back up just a second. I know we're winding down, but you know, we talk about vulnerable students of high need come in, and we really need to rally around them. I want to also share with parents who might be listening, it's really important that students who appear, children who appear like everything is pretty much okay, may not be. And we
That's
need
right.
to really watch what they're doing online. Bullying has surfaced as a result of this. Kids are in little chat rooms and enjoying each other, and pretty soon one of them's in tears, just creating more stress because somebody dealt with their stress in a more hurtful way. So just be aware, just know that it is tough for everyone.
Very good point.
Final comments, Dr. Dawson?
No, that's, there is always hope. Where there is breath, there is hope.
Wonderful. Tom Anderson, final thoughts?
I'm excited for us to figure out how to come back. And I think that it's going to be, there's going to be a necessary need for lots of collaboration from lots of different people, because there's lots of issues. And I know that we might still be at home for a while, and we need to address that. What does that look like in terms of supporting students and families? But we need to be planning to come back because school is too important. And it's not just important to the kids, it's important to the community and families. And so I think that as we come back, we have that opportunity to adjust some of our norms and change some of our institutions and really be a little bit more reactive, not reactive, proactive around how we help kids so they can have successful school experience. Because when I look back, I had a lot of really cool things happen to me in school, and a lot of not very cool things happen, and you remember all of them. And so we want to make the cool things a little bit more prevalent than the others. And I think we have the right people in place. We have those folks that we might not have had 20 years ago to do some of the work that's necessary, and I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Jim, final thoughts?
Well, I think that there is hope. We know that in time we will adapt and get through and really learn from this experience. Right now, it's tough to know when that'll happen or how it'll happen or what really we'll hold on to when we get through to the other side of this. But I think we all believe that we will. Things will be different, but things could still be glorious. So.
Wonderful. And with that, Jim Dilday, Dr. Dawson, and Thomas Anderson, thanks so much for having joined us for this A to Z Educational Consultant podcast. For our audience, subscribe to the channel. There'll be more outstanding information. You can find wonderful information, insight from people like this who are dedicated educators in our community. And with that, I wish all of you gratitude for having joined us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for hosting.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Darsweil, Dr. Dawson, Jim.
Thank you.